So how do you draw a line between healthy anger, it's an emotion we need, right, and unhealthy, dysregulated anger? And I want to talk about that, how you know the difference. Now for me, one of the biggest burdens of my past was my relationship to anger. And one of the most hurtful things that anyone ever said to me is, you know, you're a very angry woman. And it hurts. It hurts even when I say it now. But I was angry, and I was carrying a lot of anger that was from other times, like into my present time then. And that's not irrational. It's just what I knew. Because first of all, the adults in my life when I was a kid, they went way out of control with their anger. I grew up watching my dad rage at my mom and my mom berate my dad, and the two of them would smash things and get violent. And even after they were divorced when I was 7, anger and rage became the default way that they communicated about anything. Now, we had a lot of alcoholism in the family, and drunk people, as you may know, they make everybody angry, everybody else. And the angry people often make the drunk person really angry, so then there's all this anger. And I grew up terrified of anger and angry people. I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember when I was 5 or so, I was angry in my own right about something. I was really angry, and instead of a temper tantrum, I went around the house. This was for the benefit of my grandmother, who was kind and sweet, but I think she had set some rule or something and I didn't like it. So I went around the house, a house that so many nights things had been smashed up and thrown upside down by my parents. But in front of her, I went around and I took a folding chair and I folded it and I laid it on the ground. I was mad, and I took a vase off the mantle. I didn't smash it. I put it down on the hearth. I did that. It's so sad. And that was the way, you know, my strong way of making a statement, to just like put things in another place very gently, damn it. And I couldn't bear any kind of roughness. I couldn't stand yelling and doors slamming and the sound of breaking glass. That silence when you know something really terrible is coming, you know, that would just be so threatening to me. I hated all violence. I hated the sounds and the smells of drunken people, and there was no way around it. It just put me on high alert and this weird kind of tension inside. So in my teens and 20s, I thought I'd solved things by just avoiding angry people. And I thought of myself as this very peaceful, loving person. And it's not that I wasn't, but you know what happens. I had a lot of anger and it was just squashed down. I didn't even know it sometimes, and it leaked out, right? And I remember before I ever learned to re-regulate my brain and my emotions, my feelings would get very confused. And when I acted angry, it often meant actually that I was hurt. And when I was depressed, it was often because I was angry. And I did passive-aggressive things like gossiping about people and sarcasm, you know, just like, I'm just being funny, you know, why is everybody so sensitive? And I had kind of BS'd everyone about what I was feeling for so long. I didn't even know what I was feeling. And then I started talk therapy, and I had a place to talk about what happened. And it started out, I didn't really have strong emotions about my childhood, but boy, the therapist was kind of giving me the feedback that what I had been through was really bad, right? Almost to a fault, I would say. She'd want me to talk about it and talk about it. And soon, oh yeah, I had some serious anger going. And, you know, I think in some contexts, people use that as a measurement, like now you're really getting somewhere, you're getting to the heart of it. But the more I talked, the angrier I got. I read some books, I talked to other angry people, and soon everywhere I went, everyone I hung out with, we were angry. And socially, this was not very good. I was a real drag to hang out with, in fact. And I think there is this time that we all have to go through in our healing where it's coming out, we're angry, we may not be socially graceful with it. But for me, it ended up escalating to the very thing that I had always wanted to avoid, which was like raging and smashing things. Not as bad as my parents, but I intentionally broke some dishes in the kitchen a few times. And once I threw a ceramic mug out of the passenger window of a car. I wasn't even like talking angry. I just had this feeling and I threw it out of the car. So I didn't want to be that person. And I thought I was getting in touch with my feelings, but actually I was losing control of my feelings and learning to amp them up. and it wasn't cathartic. It was upsetting. There was no feeling of being done with the feeling. It just wore me down. It tore me down, and it alienated everyone. And there's nothing healing about alienating everybody and being ground down. That was not good for me. So luckily, I stumbled on a new way to heal and quit that anger-based therapy and started using techniques that helped me very quickly get those harsh emotions out and gave me comfort instead, and gave me a clear mind to get the focus off of all the bad things from the past and onto my present day surroundings and how I was handling things. And from there, it was a lot easier to start solving problems and build a happy life. And it was easier to look backwards and see, like, what happened. I could have a little bit more insight about the past, or a little bit more honest admission about how bad it was, or maybe, you know, occasionally I was making things out to be worse than it was. More often it was the other way. I tended more to be in denial about how bad my own behavior was. So clear vision was helping me kind of see it was worse than I thought when I was a kid, and my angry behaviors were having even more impact than I realized. Now, maybe you're also in the process of finding out the techniques that work for you, or of understanding what part of the behavior in you is trauma-driven, and what's just part of you, what's your personality. If you want to know more about common symptoms of childhood PTSD, I created a self-evaluation quiz, and you can take that, you can see which symptoms are happening for you or have happened, and there's a link to that quiz right down in the description section below the video. You can click more, open that up, and find all the links. But so these days, having stuck with my techniques for years and years and continuing to work on myself, I've made so much progress. And I wish I could say that that kind of PTSD anger never comes back. It does sometimes come back. But the progress is that I notice it right away and I can change course on it pretty quickly. You know, some anger is normal. Some anger is healthy and natural. It's a useful emotion. It's an honest response to unfairness and hurt, and you need it sometimes to power you to respond powerfully. So with healthy anger, it flashes through you like burning paper. Sometimes it lasts longer, but at a certain point when it's not helping you take action or solve problems, it turns into unhealthy anger. And that is something many of us were encouraged to have, or in fact became addicted to having. And that's kind of still going around, this idea that there's something empowering about just like using anger as your fuel all the time. Anger as a solution for your pain. And I want to tell you why it feels like that's true, but it doesn't work. So you can think of your feelings on a vertical scale, all right? Way down here is death, or you're catatonic or something. And up here, like maybe right here, you're depressed. And obviously there are like degrees of depression, and it's a terrible place to get stuck. We've all been there. And if something you do or some therapy you try helps you go from depression down here to anger, that's like a step up. And that's pretty common in the psychology world, to help you go from depression to anger. And there's totally a time and a place for that. It might be helpful to you from where you are. But it's pretty easy to help someone get angry. You know, like look at Twitter. Twitter's like designed to get you angry, or Facebook half the time. And it feels pretty good at first, right? That self-righteous, like, yeah, you know, I'm the good guys, they're the bad guys. Because it gets you out and up, like out of your depression and up off that little floor, right? It gets you up. It's got energy to it. Now, when you're hovering at the bottom of the emotional scale, anger and rage are a step in the right direction, and you think, wow, this is a breakthrough, I'm feeling my anger. And you'll hear a lot of people celebrating feeling their feelings. Now, yeah, we want to be able to feel our feelings, but it's not the end of the journey. Anger is not the solution, okay? There's a time when we need to get in touch with our feelings, and a time to be angry, and a time to move through that. Keep going. If anger isn't transformed pretty quickly into some clarity of mind and sane action, it'll just take you right back down the vertical scale, isolated, depressed, and scary for other people to be around. So what do you do with anger? For me, it is the most profound turning point in my life when I learned to put down on paper those fearful and resentful thoughts about people, myself, the world, the tragedies, the injustices, the petty little things that bother my mind. It all goes on paper, and I ask for it to be removed. Now, if you're not a God or higher power person and you have a reliable higher self, which I don't, you can release it. You can release those fearful and resentful thoughts. I ask for them to be removed. It's kind of a very rudimentary prayer. And this is the core technique I teach. This is how I had my transformation when I was really scared and held down by PTSD symptoms. You'll be amazed at how much more effective and clear-headed you are with those resentful, blamey, sad thoughts out of your head, out on paper, so you can be emotionally free enough to see like what actually needs your attention, what needs to be done about this problem. Sometimes the situation is crying for you to act. It's not like we don't have reasons to be angry or sad or frustrated or, righteous, right? There are situations where that's happening, and then we can see what to do about it instead of just festering on it. Sometimes something that you thought was just bugging you, once it's on paper and you ask for it to be removed, it just evaporates. You forget to even ask yourself, do I need it back? If you need it back, it comes back, trust me. But sometimes it just goes away. And isn't that great? Sometimes it's just an angry, stray wisp of emotion that got dredged up from something that happened in the past, and it softens and you don't need it anymore. Everything depends on you knowing the difference and asking yourself, is this anger something I need to attend to act on, to express myself about, or am I basically having a CPTSD reaction? When you have some freedom from the fearful and resentful thoughts, even if it's just for a little while, you're in a much better position to see the difference, to discern whether it's time to forget or time to take action. Forget, take action. And taking action is everything when it comes to healing your life. Now, if you're like I was when I was first using this freeing technique, I worried that if I lost my anger, I'd have no defense against abuse and pressure from people. And, I get it. If you're feeling that, I need my anger to protect me. But it's been my experience that the opposite is true. When my mind was tangled up with anger and resentment and someone was acting negatively towards me, I used to get paralyzed or confused. And I'd start just kind of flailing around trying to fix the situation without understanding what was going on. When I started releasing all that fear and resentment, and there's a technique to this, it's not just journaling, and I always put the link below every video down there. It's called The Daily Practice. It's free. You can learn it if you want. But when I actually learned to get free of those racing negative thoughts, I began to be able to see. I knew the difference between when I was actually being attacked and when my mind was just kind of looping on something that had happened in the past. I got clarity. And with a clear mind, I'm able to take responsibility when that's appropriate. And I can respond appropriately to problems. I can either protect myself or get away from problems and danger, or, stay and work things out if that's the right thing. I have a choice. And if you do this consistently, you have fewer problems, and when things do go wrong, you can work them out more gracefully. You get practice, so life just starts getting better. When you're in the middle of CPTSD symptoms, your life ends up populated with, like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just like a bunch of people who have a lot of rough problems themselves, and you have all this interpersonal stuff. But as you recover, those people sort of fall away, stuff starts to get more peaceful, so fewer problems are sort of coming into the mix. But when they do, you're able to handle them. You don't have to fester. And when something upsets you, you're just in the habit of clearing things up, so you know what to do first. And that's to calm the inner disturbance so that you can be clear what you need to do, if anything. And most of the time, all you need to do is take a deep breath and carry on. For me, one of the biggest burdens of my past was in my relationship to anger. Because first of all, the adults in my life, when I was a kid, went way out of control with their anger. I grew up watching my dad rage at my mom, and my mom berate my dad, and the two of them would smash things and get violent. And even after they were divorced when I was 7, anger and rage became the default way that they communicated about anything. We had a lot of alcoholism in the family, and drunk people make everybody angry, and the angry people make the drunk person angry. I grew up terrified of anger and angry people, and I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I remember when I was 5 or so, I was angry in my own right about something, really angry, and instead of a temper tantrum, I went around the house and I folded a folding chair and laid it on the floor, and I carefully took a vase off the mantel and I put it on the hearth, And that was my way of, like really tearing up the place. Very gently, damn it. Because I hated violence. I hated the sounds and smells of drunken people. There was no way around it. It just put me on high alert and this weird kind of tension inside. And the sound of breaking glass would just always make my heart race. So in my teens and 20s, I figured I'd solve things by just avoiding angry people. I thought of myself as this very peaceful, loving person. And it's not that I wasn't, but you know what happens. I had a lot of anger. And I didn't even know it sometimes. I remember before I ever learned to re-regulate my brain, my emotions were confused. When I acted angry, I was actually hurt. When I was depressed, it was because I was angry. I had BS'd everyone about what I was feeling for so long that I had no idea what I was feeling. And then at 21, I started therapy, and I had a place to talk about what had happened. And when I first started, I didn't really have that strong of emotions about my childhood, but boy, the therapist kind of drew it out of me. She thought it was terrible. It was almost to a fault. She wanted me to talk and talk and talk about it. And soon, oh yeah, I had some serious anger going. And the more I talked to her, the angrier I got. And I read some books and I talked to other angry people. And soon, everywhere I went, everyone I hung out with, I was coming off angry. I was a real drag to hang out with, in fact. And at one point, it was me raging and smashing things, which totally upsets me. So I didn't want to do that. I thought I was getting in touch with my feelings, but I was learning to lose control of my feelings and amp them up. And there is nothing healing about that. So here's the thing. Think of your feelings like on this vertical scale. And way down here is death or catatonia or something. And then one notch up is depression. And obviously there are degrees of depression, and it's a terrible place to get stuck. And if something you do or some therapy you try helps you go from depression up to anger, that's easy to do. It's actually pretty easy to get somebody angry. And it feels good at first because it gets you off the bottom of depression. When you're hovering at the bottom of the emotional scale, anger and rage are a step in the right direction. But it's a mistake to think that anger is the solution. And I think this idea that feeling your feelings is inherently constructive is just not true. There's a time when we need to get in touch with our feelings and a time to be angry, but if anger isn't transformed pretty quickly into some clarity and some peace and some action, it'll just take you right back down the vertical scale, isolated, depressed, and scary for other people to be around. So what to do with anger? For me, it was the most profound turning point in my life when I was shown how to put it on paper. I put my fears and resentments about life, the tragedies, the injustices, the petty little things that bother my mind. It all went on the paper, and then I asked for it to be removed. Now, if you're not a God person and you have a reliable higher self, which I don't, you can release it. You'll be amazed at how much more effective and clear-headed you are with all of that out of your head and released or removed. Now, if you're like I was when I first started doing this daily practice, I worried that if I lost my anger, I'd have no defense against abuse and pressure from other people. And it's been my experience that the opposite is true. When my mind was tangled up with anger and resentment and someone was acting negatively toward me, I'd be paralyzed or confused. I'd start flailing around trying to fix the situation without understanding what was going on. And when I started releasing all that fear and resentment, and there is a technique to this, it's not just journaling, but when I was actually getting free of all that ucky negative thinking, I could see. I knew when I was being attacked, and I knew when the disturbance was actually in here. I got clarity. And with a clear mind, I'm able to respond appropriately to problems. I can either protect myself, or I can get the hell out of there, or I can stay and work things out if that's the right thing. Things get worked out now. And when I'm freaked out, I know where to go first, and that's to calm the inner disturbance so that I can be clear what I need to do. And most of the time, I don't need to do anything. I just carry on. Tell us about obsessing over something that angers us or triggers us. Yeah, she said, I know you mention it at times, but wow, it sure does resonate with me. Yeah, anger. uh, Anger, that intense like rage or hatred or anger grabs your nervous system so hard and renders you so inert. And you know what really bothers me right now is a lot of people have figured out how to like stir that up in people. And I feel like that happens a lot on social media and the news. There's intentional anger creation. and getting, trying to get people obsessed. Because when people have given away all their power to anger, you can manipulate them. So take back your power, and start to have some mastery over your resentment. Now, we're all human. We all get resentful, and anger is a natural emotion that is a good emotion to have because it's how we protect ourselves. So I'm going to make a separation between anger being the healthy emotion. Somebody comes up and shoves you. Anger is an appropriate feeling, and it's going to actually give you adrenaline and alertness so that you can respond to that situation and keep yourself safe. Resentment is when you can't stop thinking about it and that obsessing on it, like you said, Dawn, obsessing on it. And obsession is the worst waste of your life. This life is so precious, and to like take this consciousness of ours, like some people are able to use their consciousness to create cures. So you guys, have you been around for a few months? My kid's dad, Harry's dad, has multiple myeloma, and people have been working on that for years. And guess what? He's going to be okay thanks to their work. So instead of being resentful, those people got busy. Okay. That's the kind of thing that people can accomplish when they're free of resentment. But when we get loaded up with resentment, we all know we've encountered those kind of people, and they've affected our lives in terrible ways. They're abusive, they're violent, and quite often they've lost their sanity. I often mention, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we have a lot of people who are mentally ill live out on the streets. It's a place that is very tolerant, and I guess those places go fairly supportive of people who are in that situation. So we see a lot of it. And if you walk down the street downtown where I live, there's often people just screaming and ranting. The place where I get my hair cut, every time there's a guy stalking around with no shirt, just saying the worst, most hateful things about people that are unspeakable, and everybody just ignores it and has coffee and just like it's nothing. That's where resentment will take you. It'll destroy you, and it'll destroy your gift. And I'm telling you, the world really needs all hands on deck right now. Everybody's gifts are needed. We do not have room to just sit around and spin about what we saw on TV. We need to heal, summon up our goodness, and become agents of good in the world. Ascend to Jedi status, as I said to our Jedi buddy here. Jedi is the common cultural reference for someone who is like a knight, and that's what we have the opportunity to be. So first of all, I just want to say, just categorically, there's no room for resentment. I too had terrible things happen to me as a kid. I too spent a lot of time resentful about it. I've been able to process those memories so that they're not electrified and causing me to be obsessed on them anymore. They've been able to recede into the background of memories. It helps that those people are no longer around. They're not actively triggering me. And there are people who do actively trigger me. And when I see them, it's hard, but it's so much easier for me to remain intact as a person, as a mind, as a spirit around triggering things, because I'm diligent in getting free of my fear and resentment. There's very little logic to fear and resentment. We can talk about it till the cows come home, but there's not a lot to say except that it looks like this, and I am resentful at, so and so, or it's a person or an entity, because I have fear. They did this, and again, I don't want you to just copy what I'm saying here. Go take the course. I'm referring to a very specific technique here. We never just make a list of what we resent. That's just ranting. It's not a written rant. It's more like a confession that this is going on in our minds. And if you're honest with yourself, you have resentments. All of you, all of us, we're human. We have resentments that if we were to say them out loud would be just like that shirtless guy by my hair cutter's off place, just saying the unspeakable things. We have thoughts that are unspeakable. Okay, so we're still at a point where we can control our mouths and we don't say it, but it's in there. It's in there, and it's just as destructive. It completely just robs you of your joy, of your power. Because power, let me talk about power. The power in the sense that I'm using it. Power is you wake up in the morning and there's an energy to you. When you are empowered with the power I'm talking about, you wake up looking reasonably forward to your day, feeling good about what you're about to do, getting yourself ready, feeling purposeful about it. Yes, you can brush your teeth. Yes, you can keep yourself clean. Yes, you can show up on time. All those things take power. It takes power to do those things. And then advanced power, maybe, maybe you can earn a paycheck and raise a child and uh, run a taco truck. You know, there's all these things that people they do amazing things. Like, how did they do that? Well, power showed up for them. They had a ratio of power to problems where power won. They got something done, right? Sometimes power loses. Sometimes the resentment beats out power and pushes people down, destroys everything. So I keep circling back, Dawn, to just say, first of all, just disavow this obsession. Just consider it wrong. There's nothing for you here. There's nothing for you here. You write down what the fears and resentments are. You ask for them to be removed. And when you get a little break from that resentment, then what's going to be left? Not nothing. See, that's often the fear. I used, when I first started this back in 1994, another century, I was afraid that if I didn't have my resentment, it's like my resentment kept me safe. My resentment gave me a personality. I thought I was, The Simpsons, the guy next door who goes Oakley dokley with the sweaters and stuff. I used to always say, I don't want to end up like that. I thought that that's what like spiritual people who weren't angry were like. They were just foolish. They were just to be made fun of. They were soft. They were boring. And I wanted something exciting. But you know what? I'll tell you what's boring. Resentful people are boring. Nobody wants to hear it. Let's just be honest. So we get free of that so that now we have like a fresh idea. We have inspiration. We have some love in our hearts in terms of like how it's received by other people. Like people who are inspired, friendly, have some energy, fun, and there have been times in my life when I was in the hospital once for a month straight, and I was still doing the daily practice regularly. And, even though I had this horrible, scary thing going on and we didn't know what was going to happen, and I was fairly isolated, I made friends with the people available, and my life progressed during that month. I made friends. There was this group of nurses who came into my room at night and just supported me and talked to me. And I had tremendous personal growth during this month of just like great big bummer going on. It's not the situation. It's not the situation. It's power. Power showed up in me to heal from that problem as much as I could. And power showed up in me to keep growing as a person under those circumstances. I could have been quite resentful. I was initially. It was a medical mistake. It was 14 major surgeries. It was quite a nuisance, and 44 ER visits, emergency room visits. I was pretty mad, and I was obsessed, and I was left with like all these problems. Well, guess what? I had these problems that they said would never heal, and they did heal. They eventually healed, and they healed when I had gotten free of the resentment. And I'm not trying to introduce magical thinking here and say, oh, all health problems, it's just resentment. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I was having a really hard time healing things that ought to have healed fairly easily. And the surgeon kept saying, I just don't know why, there's like only a 3% chance that somebody's not going to heal from this. And you're always in the 3%. I just don't understand why. And, well, guess what? It took me a couple years of a lot of writing and a lot of being willing to change my life. But then I sort of got back into just regular healing mode. And that's what I learned. Like when we carry all that resentment and all that self-attack, that's what PTSD does. It's a nervous system injury that then turns around and keeps injuring your nervous system. And your nervous system is what drives your immune system and your blood flow and your cell function and your thinking and your talking and your digestion and your metabolism and your hormones and your reproductive cycles and everything. It's run by your nervous system. So if your nervous system is under attack by your own mind all the time, you're in trouble. And that's why people who have had childhood trauma have this incredibly we are the healthcare expensive people. We're the ones who suffer with the diabetes and cancer and heart disease and reproductive disorders and cancer, and not to mention learning disabilities, like everything bad. You go to a prison, how many people in there do you think have CPTSD? Probably 100%, right? So we're the ones. We pay the price. If we can't get free of this, we're the ones who are going to pay the price with health problems and life problems and difficulty connecting. So I just exhort everyone, like, take this very seriously. If you find that you're resentful, if you find yourself getting all inflamed when you read news or watch somebody on TV who's trying to convince you that you're one of the good people, but half of everybody is evil, like, beware, your nervous system is not going to fare well under this, laboring under this delusion. If you want to make the world better, start with yourself. If you want to make the world better, start with yourself. Clear your mind, clear that resentment using the tools. I'm giving you very simple free tools you can use to do it, and dedicate yourself to it, and just watch what changes around you. Watch what changes. I was just a depressed blob for a while, and now I feel much happier. My CPTSD is more healed, and I feel more useful because I've gotten free enough from all that belief that, about being, I thought I was ruined forever. I'm not ruined at all. I'm dented up a little bit, but I'm not ruined. And it turns out I had gifts in me, and I get to use them and enjoy them and have things go better for me. Still totally have CPTSD. Anybody close to me will see it from time to time. It still shows up, but I know what to do about it. And when you know what you can do, when those feelings, like, why do we've been talking a lot about isolation, and the new connection course is out now, and it's a lot about, like, isolation, and really just going on a deep dive on, like, what's happening with that. Why are you doing that? You know why we isolate? We isolate because it's too damn much for us people and all that. It's so triggering, and you get overwhelmed. It's overwhelming to just be alive out there in the world if you have nowhere to put all this, like, spinning that happens. It's overwhelming. So a lot of us self-regulate by just avoiding people. And if we don't do it flat out, like being a hermit, we do it in a pretend way, what I call covert avoidance, pretending, just going and having shallow relationships. Hi, Bob, how's it going? Okay, bye. Putting up, making an appearance, but never really connecting with anybody. It'll hollow out your life so bad. And then your time's up and you'll be sorry. I'm just telling you, get real about that. The most important thing in your life is that you are your real self connected to others. That's what you were made for. And we were talking about this. We have the group coaching intensive, and somebody in there was talking, and they were saying that they just had this, like, free floating resentment about having to do recovery at all. It's not fair. And it's true. It's not fair that you were hurt. But what that points to is that there's this ideal version of ourselves, that we have an idea. We actually are aware of the good self that we actually were made to be. It's there somewhere. And it's frustrating sometimes that we can't be that it's hard to get there, that it's dented, that people have done terrible things to us. It's frustrating and sad sometimes, but it's there. It's there, and we're going to bring it forward. We're going to bring it forward, and that's what if you're here on this channel at all, you're working on it already. How amazing. What could be a better use of your time than to overcome your trauma and start to become your real self and become a Jedi of somebody who has love to give, somebody who's solid, somebody who can take care of things, somebody who can respond to problems. If you have an earthquake in your neighborhood, you can be the one who helps people because you're not so triggered that you've avoided everybody. You can think of others. You can find your way to be of service to other people, even if your job is something that doesn't involve that gift. Everybody has to make a living. That's okay. That's noble and good too. But we need to use our gifts to be happy and fulfilled. We got to be using our gifts, and trauma absolutely gets in the way of that. So here's why your resentment is good. Here's my counterintuitive argument about why, actually, Dawn, I'm really glad you have this terrible resentment, because it's causing you enough pain that you have to do something about it. That you're here on this call at all and you're asking this question. That's very advanced. You're in the PhD level now. Yes, it's hurting you so much that you don't want it anymore. And now you're going to put it on paper, because I know you know these techniques. You're going to put it on paper and you're going to face it so that you can be rid of it. If you can't face it, you'll never be rid of it. If it's just in the fog, right? Everything's shoved off in the fog. I don't know, maybe if I don't deal with it, it'll go away. Well, did it? Has it? Some things, but what hasn't gone away. Everybody knows, we have our problems that are just stuck. We're stuck with. Now, no matter what you do for healing, you're still going to be a human being and you're still going to have faults. You're still going to make mistakes. You're still going to have pain. You know, if we live long enough, the people we love will die. We'll have that sadness. So life is going to go on. But how will we show up for it? How will we? You know, how about with strength of heart, with generosity, with kindness, no division? We'll show up and we'll keep being encouragers. And we'll be our real selves. We'll be our real funky ass selves. You know, weird as that might be, we get to be ourselves. We can only be ourselves, right? Being ourselves isn't an excuse to just dive into cruelty. It's your kindness, patience, you know, open-mindedness, all of these virtues, they help you being yourself be successful for you. So that's on the other side of the resentment, is the good things and the way that you contribute and the things that actually bring fulfillment to your life. And the ability to have a partner if that's what you want, the ability to make a living. Most people want those things. How to cope with feelings of abandonment, anger, deviation, and heartbreak. Devastation, I bet you meant. And heartbreak after a breakup, as well as a sense this is all my fault. Triggers, stress. Yeah. Oh, yes. I'm with you. So it sounds like what you're talking about is what Pete Walker calls abandonment melange. And nobody who doesn't have this could possibly understand how intense and how brutal it is. The sense, the feeling, the emotional state that comes on. For those of us who were abandoned when we were little, a lot of us get this thing that he named abandonment melange. And it's 3 terrible emotions: rage, panic, and grief, all dialed up to 11 all at once. And devastation. Yeah, anger, heartbreak, you're talking about it. So breakups are terrible. And if you're like me, once you've been through that once or twice, it makes it really hard to leave a relationship, even when everything in your being wants to get out, because even people you don't like or want to be with, it's going to get triggered. And it's a level of depression that's so hard to deal with. But here's what you do. Well, first of all, I'm going to make a plug for Pete Walker's book. I really value, hold on, his stuff on abandonment and emotional flashbacks is really important, and you can use it. And it's full of little lists and stuff that you can plug in right away. And he says at the beginning, you can skip around in it. I hope to have my book done by the end of the year, and then it's going to be my brand of something like that, but immediately useful and teaching my radical supposition on this. Something different about me is I don't go into inner child. I know a lot of people find value in that. I've got a video coming out tomorrow about that. I don't see myself as different parts at all. It's just not, I just don't relate to that. And because I put such a high premium on taking responsibility for my feelings, I don't go there. With abandonment melange, though, the most valuable thing you can do is to say, oh, this is abandonment melange. The minute you can name it and say, oh, this is a CPTSD thing, and people get this, and it clouds my perception. It gives me that feeling like, I don't know about you, but when it's upon me, it feels like I don't belong in the world. Nobody wants me here. I don't belong. All those happy people are walking around having their coffee, and I do not belong, and I never will. And it's a terrible feeling, and it's the darkest thought that I can have. Very, very awful thought. So when that's happening, you just say, oh, this is abandonment melange. And it's a type of emotional flashback. I'm going to wager you had this feeling as a kid when you were 2 or 1 or whenever when going through this, and you very rightly had a fear of death. There it is. It got burned into your nervous system. So with the daily practice, you can unpack that one fear at a time. And there's a lot of fear that's pre-verbal. So the fear that you're going to die and get kicked out of the igloo and be abandoned, it runs so deep that it's very hard to get at by talking about it. But I've found with the daily practice, by writing all the dumb stuff, just the top of the surface of whatever I sit down with, and whatever the fear is, whatever it is, I'm writing it down, that I'm getting enough stuff off that unconscious stuff does have the opportunity to either come up into consciousness, or most often, okay, this is the fun part, kind of, I'm sort of being ironic, but it is, it's fun because it gets you there. If you're doing the daily practice twice a day, you're going to be, it's sort of like, It's sort of like digesting. You're digesting your experience. So you're consuming it, you're excreting it, and you're moving on. And that way you can afford to have your experience. And the only way you can really get free of some of these deep-seated things is to face them. They're going to come up sometimes. You know, you go on a date, you get rejected, and you go into like a colossal depression over a date, and you intellectually know, like, I shouldn't even be doing this. I didn't even like this person. I don't want a second date. But now the thing happened. The monster got out of the cage. So you say, I'm having abandonment melange. That's what's going on. I'm going to write about it, and I'm going to get a little relief from it. And you just keep finding so that the experience of getting rejected, it gives you a whole bunch of stuff to write about. And the more you write about, the freer you get. All that stuff eventually, it's got to come out either in your experience or on the page. You know, sooner or later, all that suppressed unconscious stuff, it's going to be expressed. I think everybody knows that. It's gonna come out somehow. If you can't express it at all, it's gonna come out as cancer. I don't know. Not that all cancer is caused by anger. Just, our bodies do fail at some point, but so the breakups are the hardest part. If you've just broken up, you might wanna check out my dating course. If part of the problem for you is that you tend to go with unavailable and inappropriate people and you wanna change that, that's what that course is for. It's a very specific class for a specific problem. And strong stuff. And then I teach a technique for how to date in a structured way so that you don't get bonded with people till further on, till you've had a chance to actually learn about whether it's a good idea. Hello, Anna. My question is how to deal with my anger toward my family and the world. It transformed me into a monster, and I fear it will destroy my life. Thank you for listening. Yes, I'm so glad. So I've kind of been, you probably asked this earlier and we've talked about it, but daily practice, take it 100% seriously. Because if you really wanna be happy you're gonna need to be free. You're gonna need to stop being at war with the world and start being, in service to the world, We all came here to bring our gifts to bear, to make it a more wonderful world, and to serve others. And if you're not doing that, you're gonna keep noticing that something big is missing. So take it very seriously. If anger is stopping you from being connected and from being your wonderful self, who you were made to be, it's time for that to be your highest priority. And where you will get reinforcement as you begin to like surrender that to the paper and do the work of getting free of it, getting free of it, what will start to come in is positive things, positive connections, positive ideas. One thing that happened to me is I decided to go to grad school about a year in when I was doing the daily practice. And I learned the crappy childhood fairy is entirely 100% the fruit of me just surrendering more fear and resentment. What's everybody going to think? My experience is different. They're going to send me hate mail. Who am I to say anything? But I just got free and I just am myself and I try to be of service to you guys. And I spent 10 minutes with my eyes closed here, just meditating and praying that I could just like be useful. And if I have been, yay. That's pretty much what I care about now. And when I'm grounded in that purpose, I'm a lot less angry. And by the way, my family has pretty much cut me off. They're not even in my life. They've never approved of me. It's not going to come from there for me. And if I can go on and be happy, I think that it's possible for other people too. And I know that some people have had even worse things happen than me. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. But whatever it was, in whatever measure you can, to get free of the resentment and the fear. And if I keep saying this and you don't know what I'm talking about, go take the free course. I tell the story, I explain, I teach the methods. You can learn and try it in less than 40 minutes. The daily practice. It's on the courses page, courses.crappychildhoodfairy.com. And it's a great way to come into the community because you get to come to these twice monthly Zoom calls. The group coaching is for members. That costs money. These are free. They're twice a month. We do the daily practice together. I take questions. We get to talk with microphones. It's kind of nice. So I encourage you to do that and take it seriously and make it your top priority. How do I manage anxiety and anger from my recent ex mislabeling? My recent ex mislabeling me a narcissist due to when I'm genuinely worried it will damage mutual friendships. Let me read that again. Okay. Linnell asks, how do I manage an anger from my recent ex mislabeling me a narcissist due to CPTSD symptoms when I'm genuinely worried it will damage mutual friendships? Rats. It's a lot of smoke in here. I can't do anything about it. So it's interesting, Linnell, that you say anxiety and anger, because those are other words for fear and resentment. And those are the two buckets that I put all negative emotions in my daily practice. And I teach a very concrete technique to have less of that. So you have a recent ex who called you a narcissist. Everybody's calling each other narcissists. What a vague thing that is. But I don't know if you saw, Linnell, I had a video a week or two ago about narcissistic traits with CPTSD, and I listed like 9 of them. It's really, really common. I think maybe I listed 15. There's so many ways that CPTSD can appear for moments like narcissism. It's very unlikely it's narcissistic personality disorder. It's a trait. And it has to do with when we were growing up, we got so little attention, we can be prone to, especially in early recovery, we're prone to kind of a very like self-centered attitude of just thinking it's all about me. It's I'm feeling bad, everybody's persecuting me, and other people notice it and they're just like, gosh, that person's awfully self-centered. And there's really no way around it in early recovery. Somebody's going to have to focus on you, and then we got to grow out of it. So I wasn't sure about the part where you said it affects friendships. I guess, I think you're saying that your ex told people that you're a narcissist. Yeah, trashing people is wrong. Trashing people does terrible harm. And I'm just going to cross my fingers for you that people will consider the source, and they'll also consider the target. And if you have a good reputation of being a caring person, you're going to get through this with your friends. And if you can't get through this with your friends, I'm happy to say that more friends always come along. Sometimes healing from your CPTSD involves cycles of shedding friends. And it's one of the hardest things about it. But once you start becoming healthier and happier, you don't fit with all your friends anymore. You don't fit with the ones like the misery loves company types, the type who resents you because you change your life or get a raise or get a supervisory role, or you get into a relationship. Have you ever had people who resented you for that? It's sad to say, but if they can't work that out, those people are not suitable friends. But since you're asking, I'm still going to help you kind of focus on the root problem, which is that you have CPTSD, and there's negative talk happening about you, or so you suspect. There's negative talk happening about you among people who formerly cared about you, and it has to do with an accusation that you are a narcissist. I know what you mean when you say that. But it also goes back to when people, if you're serious about healing your childhood PTSD, and this ex of yours is not asking me, but I would be like, stop diagnosing other people, stop focusing on their faults, focus on yourself. And if he's so great, and yet he believes that you were a narcissist, what's he doing with a narcissist, right? It takes a certain kind of person with their own problems to choose a narcissist for a partner. So everybody, focus on yourself. Bring the focus back in. You're going to have much better results focusing on yourself. The people who are screwed up are going to drift away. But when they threaten your reputation, as I think you're describing right now, for me, it would be a lot of writing fears and resentments, and not just writing, not just like a big rant, but using the specific technique I teach. Harry, do you have access to that? Could you get a link to the daily practice into the chat for me? Okay, that'd be great. So we'll get that link in there. It's a powerful technique to start changing your consciousness about things. And I'm not going to guarantee any particular point of view change that you need to have or will have. You're going to find out for yourself. It always surprises me, but it's always in the direction of less anxiety, less rage, less kind of CPTSD thinking, and more clear thinking. And clear thinking is your friend. Clear thinking helps you take smart actions and choose good people. And the daily practice is also there to just help you deal with the tears and the pain of that people would do this to you. It's such a crappy thing to do. I'm not even going to do it. I won't even list it, but I can't tell you the number of things people have said about me. And nowadays, because I'm on YouTube, I get hate mail. And it does occasionally get to me a little bit, but what I'm recommending to you is exactly what I do. The best thing you can do is kind of know what your purpose is. What are you trying to do? And I'm going to assume if you're feeling, you have some kind of a desire that you're trying to bring good into the world. And so when stuff feels like there's nothing I can do about it, people are just being jerks, something didn't go my way, I can always bring my focus back to, yes, but what's my mission? What am I trying to do here? There's this story about Martin Luther King that I often quote because it was a turning point when I read it in my life. But when Martin Luther King was leading the civil rights movement, there was a long period of time when he was leading and things were happening and people were demonstrating and marching, and there were news media people and clergy and world leaders going, we think this is all good and everything, but not so fast, right? Like, if it shouldn't be so fast. And they said, people are saying that you're really pushing this too fast. You're probably going to ruin the whole thing because you're pushing it too fast. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, "Oh, are they saying that? I don't know. I'm so busy running the civil rights movement. I don't even know what they say." And that's who I aspire to be, as somebody so busy trying to do my thing that I'm not even hearing the naysayers. And I hope you can do that too. Somebody who just says that about you, sounds very immature. So good luck. I hope you get to heal from that. And I hope that it becomes an opportunity to raise your level a little bit, raise your vibration, and start getting ready for a much better relationship next time. Dan Reg asks, "Dear Fairy, how do I handle not being able to express any other emotions but anger? Yeah, the only emotion I ever learned to act out." I'm going to have such a boring answer for you. I think this is a job for the daily practice. I think you have too much. It's just too much in there. You have feelings under there, but it's just too much, and you need some relief. Everybody needs a break. Everybody needs a way to just unpack some of this stuff. You've heard my metaphor of we have a little paper cup every time we write. We're in a leaky boat. We want to keep doing that, or the boat can get too sunk. You know what happens to people whose anger gets out of control? They can get in trouble. They can end up in prison and stuff. I don't know that you're saying anything of the sort, but I totally know what it's like to be leading with anger. And here's what it is about anger. A, I was told that it was good for me to express my anger. B, when you're like depressed, like deeply depressed or suicidally depressed, anger is like coffee. It just it's like a way up. It's just like better to be angry and raging than to be sitting there thinking about ending your life. All right. So the anger is good. But I also think that some people who are in helping professions, if they don't really know what to do to change your life or to deal with trauma, one thing that almost everybody knows how to do is to help people get in touch with anger and sadness. And so you'll see a lot of that. And if you're seeing somebody for help and all that's ever happening is you're talking about how sad and angry you are and why, I would just say you need to find somebody who actually knows what to do with those feelings. And that's what the daily practice is. It's a constructive way to face those feelings and let them get distilled so that what you're left with is what you really need to act on or care about, and everything else can just evaporate. And a lot of it can evaporate. And it's terrible when you're jammed up like that with all that anger. There's a lot of stuff that you do need to be paying attention to. And you probably have the nagging feeling that your life is passing you by and that you're really losing time and losing opportunities over it. And you'd be right. That's what's happening when your boat is sinking. So you don't want your boat to sink. You want to be very rigorous about bucketing the leaky water out of your boat. It might always be kind of leaky, but actually when you are getting it out more regularly, you're going to have a better idea like what's going on with the boat. Is there something you can do? Get some new ideas. And it's unbelievable how a whole series of new ideas can really take you in a whole new direction that you didn't think you were going in, but it's more satisfying because it's real. It's not driven by fear what other people think or, fear you have to have this one relationship. You start to be like, I don't know. I want the thing that I want the thing that works. I want the thing that feels good. I want the thing that is harmonious for me and not just, constantly making me have to fight for everything I have. So anger sucks. I've been there and I go there sometimes, but a lot less. I remember the first time I heard the term emotional sobriety, and it totally scared me because it sounded like something that I didn't know how to do. But I knew in my bones it was something that I craved. My problem wasn't ever substance abuse. That wasn't the issue that I happened to have. My issue was childhood PTSD. And that's what was turning my life upside down in a way where it was very much like being an alcoholic or a drug addict. I was exhausted all the time. I was late to things. I got angry easily. I was sad a lot. And this was back before there was a word for what happens to people who were traumatized as kids. I thought it was just me. And I was embarrassed, and I wasn't too sure that I knew how to change. So the feeling I got from those words, emotional sobriety, was like, it was just really powerful, and I wanted to have it. In recovery circles for drugs and alcohol, the word sobriety is a really important thing, obviously, but it means more than just not drunk or not high. In the context of substance abuse healing, sober means a person is living in a frame of mind and in an emotional state that is even keel and non-dramatic and that helps prevent relapses. Because that's what tends to set off relapse, emotional upsets or any kind of emotional intensity, which can even include positive emotions like elation. Now, if you've ever had any kind of addiction, you know that it's the continued abstinence that can be the hardest. So staying sober can really depend on guarding against experiences that are going to be emotionally upsetting or intense, at least during early sobriety. And that probably means avoiding the slippery behaviors that can kind of open the door to intense emotional experiences, like, getting into an argument or having a one-night stand or letting yourself get too lonely, or getting into sneaky activities of some kind that make you feel like you have to lie about yourself, like, I don't know, stealing. So that feels pretty clear to me. Keep life gentle, not too crazy when intense emotions could drive you to take a drink or pick up a drug. But what about for people who are healing from trauma that they experienced when they were kids? What constitutes a relapse for us? I would say it's when we slip into emotional or neurological dysregulation. And that's the brain state that sometimes gets triggered in those of us with CPTSD. It can be a big avalanche of negative emotions, or a discombobulated, spaced out feeling, or even a state of hyper-excitement about money or romance. Now, dysregulation isn't the same thing as intoxication, but it can mimic that lack of clear judgment, that volatility, or the complete lack of boundaries that you'd see in someone who's drunk or high. And if you're wondering if you get dysregulated, by the way, you might want to take the quiz that I developed that lists common symptoms. And that quiz is on the free tools page of my website. There's other stuff there. And the free tools page is always linked in the description below my videos. And I should say this, while dysregulation and intoxication are not the same thing, trauma and addiction are definitely related, in that a history of trauma seems to have a high correlation with subsequent addiction. Some people, like Gabor Mate, for example, believe that all addiction has a basis in trauma. Not everyone agrees with that, but even if all addiction arises out of trauma, even if that's true, one distinction between addiction and trauma is that with addiction, the substances themselves are the active agent. You take them, you get drunk or high. With trauma, there's nothing quite parallel to that. The active agent is seldom something that you consume. It's an experience or a behavior that functions as a trigger. And one example would be someone yelling at you. Your emotions would just, skyrocket like anyone, but because of the history of trauma, there can be an oversized intensity to it, a physiological reaction that you can't directly control or avoid. So without any conscious decision or behavior from you, without a conscious action, you can slide into dysregulation relapse. And I'm guessing that feeling is instinctively familiar to you. So how could a person with CPTSD strengthen themselves against that kind of relapse and cultivate emotional sobriety? The first thing is to be guarded around negative thinking and emotions that could be a slippery slope into oversized negative feelings. And it's possible to notice you're feeling sad or angry, but not to just dive into those feelings. A lot of treatments that are meant to help people recovering from trauma encourage the exploration of negative emotions. Oh, that's terrible. How do you feel about that? Sometimes that's a part of healing. But when it comes to healing painful memories, there's such a thing as healthy compartmentalization. Small upsets might be safe to let in and feel, but something horrible and upsetting might need to be kind of held at a slight distance for yourself. It's possible to look at a tough situation and not open your heart to it 100%. And of course, when someone always shuts down around painful feelings, that's not healthy, that's denial. But having a little bit of control over when to embrace the feelings and when to be a little more circumspect is a good thing. That's part of emotional sobriety. To some degree, you can avoid triggers. When you're working hard on healing from trauma, it may not be the time to start a new relationship or run for political office. It's a good time to engage more with activities that are calming for you. Exercise, being outside in nature, avoiding high conflict, high drama people, avoiding the news. When you're triggered, an ordinary feeling like anger can froth up into rage. And now you're on thin ice emotionally. And with CPTSD, rage can easily burst out into, saying something that you'll regret, followed by 3 days of intense dysregulation. Is it worth it? Have you ever had this happen? Or on the other end of the emotional spectrum, the trigger could be a positive emotion like elation or giddiness, triggered by something that feels thrilling or exciting, like when a person you weren't sure likes you finally texts you, or you get a surprise check in the mail. With CPTSD, even elation can be strong enough that it causes you to relapse just as hard as if you had a rage attack. And it starts as good news, but the resulting dysregulation can throw you into, eventually, depression, anxiety, brain fog, or romantic obsession. Those are some of the things that'll really knock you off your game. So emotional sobriety means being mindful about things that are emotionally intense for you, good and bad. And you can avoid experiences that are likely to trigger you while you simultaneously learn to calm your reaction to triggers. There's a strong emotional reaction, and then there's a period of dysregulation, followed by a period of getting back on your feet again. So when it happens, you can be working on it. Sometimes the victory is that you got out of your slip and you didn't let it lead to an avalanche of dysregulation. Now, falling down, getting back up, it's practice. It's how we do it. It's how you'll learn to use your tools to start handling stress in a better way. But of course, when it's too much, it can really set you back. If you're hiding from life, though, you're not getting the chance to learn. Now, of course, it's impossible to completely avoid triggers. Life is full of them. They can be subtle. They can be automatic. They're things that you did nothing to cause, like, a car almost hits you when you're crossing the street, or waking up dysregulated. That happens to me. That's an emotional flashback. You can't just stop going outside or stop working or stop waking up, but you can focus on noticing and arresting the emotional reaction that follows. Now, that's easier said than done, but there are ways to do it. For most people who went through abuse and neglect as a kid, there are some pretty standard patterns in terms of emotions. The emotions that can snowball include fear, like fear of abandonment or a panic attack, anger, definitely anger, a feeling of injustice or a feeling we're being unfairly singled out for mistreatment or left out, being overlooked, being discounted, being criticized, being rejected, feeling jealous, and definitely shame. That's one of the big ones, feeling ashamed. And so it starts with like normal level thought, like, oh, I think I may have said something I shouldn't have said. But with the CPTSD kind of interacting with it in your mind, it can escalate from I shouldn't have said that to I'm a worthless idiot and I'll be alone forever. And this kind of self-attack can then lead to hurtful behavior towards others, which can lead to more self-attack or retaliation from them, in fact. And then the feelings go out of control. They get giant, they go all over the place, they no longer make sense in the context of what happened. Is that a familiar thing with your CPTSD symptoms sometimes? So emotional sobriety is the state when a person has gotten skilled, not at denying their emotions, but at halting the progression of emotions from an ordinary right-size level to a, full, incredible Hulk, ripped t-shirt rage attack. And having some control over this takes time, it takes practice. Talking to people, learning from them, learning to tolerate the times when you fail, and getting support from people whose experience and judgment you trust. Part of this healing cycle is getting back up on your feet and trying again. And it may bother you sometimes that while you are exercising emotional restraint, other people are just allowing themselves to go emotionally wild. They can yell, they can rush into a relationship, they can stay home and eat ice cream in bed all day if they want to, and nothing bad seems to happen. But don't let this fool you into throwing away your emotional sobriety. Even people without CPTSD do better when they pause and temper those impulses. For you, pausing is everything. It takes self-discipline to avert the intense reaction. But the more days you live through where you haven't freaked out on someone or made an impulsive decision, the more you have an inner equilibrium that makes it easier and easier to pause between trigger and reaction. Now, just like with alcohol or drugs, it's easy to get cocky and think, I haven't jumped into an instant or ill-advised relationship in 2 years. I think I can handle jumping into this relationship that's right in front of me today. But we all know what happens. The same old thing, only sometimes even worse than before. Now, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they say that alcoholism is progressive and fatal. And that means a person might not drink for many years, but if they relapse and return to drinking, it will be as if it has progressed a great deal during the years they weren't drinking. It's more severe than it used to be. And it's my experience that emotional sobriety is vulnerable in the same way. You haven't raged at another driver in a long time, and then your defenses get weak one day and you end up, chasing somebody down the road because they cut you off. You're leaning on your horn. Then you feel ashamed and the dysregulation comes back. But now you're capable of something better, so the shame feels even worse. And maybe that's a good thing, but the pain is there worse than you used to feel it. That's sometimes how we learn. And when you notice you're in the danger zone, with the gateway emotions, if you will, you can take immediate steps to back out of them before it gets worse. Don't make hasty decisions. Don't make big pronouncements until you've had a chance to run it by a trusted friend. Use measures like my daily practice, which is the set of techniques I use every day to release emotional residue and get calmer and clearer. You can exercise, take a shower, dance. You can bite a lemon. Anything that helps give you a little nudge, a little push on your nervous system with a sensation or a movement or a reminder that you're working to heal those old reactions. They help. Other people might tell you, oh no, you're doing it wrong, that you need to feel your anger, or you need to grieve, or you need to go deeper into your emotions. And ask yourself, does the person saying this know about the role of dysregulation in complex trauma? Have they experienced it? Do they know what it's like to turn into the Incredible Hulk when emotions come up? They know what works for them. You're learning what works for you. And the triggers in life, they never stop. But here's how you'll know that you're growing more and more emotionally sober. One is you'll keep a fairly positive attitude even when life's problems come up. You will use words and honesty to express your feelings rather than manipulate people or fear how they'll react if you tell the truth. You will be comfortable when you're alone and comfortable when you're with other people. You'll be able to say no to those people gracefully when you need to. You won't feel the need to people please. You'll be willing to help other people when they ask, and when it's reasonable to do so. Yes, you can say yes, but you're not going to feel like you have to fix them or save them. You'll have the power to go slow in dating relationships so you have time to get to know the other person and assess if they're a good potential partner for you. And when you see red flags, you'll step away. When you're sad, you'll cry, but you won't get sucked into an emotional black hole. When you're angry, you'll be able to stand up for yourself or work things out if you want to. And when the other person isn't willing to work things out, you'll be able to accept that without losing your calm. You'll develop a genuine interest in other people. And rather than wanting to get something from them or make them fix you, you will be happy to find that you're capable of meeting your own needs. And then the need to help or rely on other people won't scare you or drive you into self-denial. You'll be able to ask for the help that you need when you do. You'll be able to tune out other people's unnecessary drama, right? You'll have enough self-discipline to care for yourself and the people who depend on you in an ordinary and good enough way. You'll give yourself enough sleep, enough exercise, good food, and a good social life. You'll begin to feel confident that whatever happens, you will figure out how to deal with it.